So this is a revision video for Year 10 in particular on an alternative to P.E.E. and how to access the higher grades, also on how to embed quotes as a useful reminder. So you've been introduced to the idea of the camera analysis then, which breaks down a way for you to formalise your answer when you're writing your controlled assessment. So the first thing you could do is to take a snapshot. So this is in effect your topic sentence, and it allows you to establish what your point is. So if you think about the old structure of P.E.E., this is the first part where you say in one sentence what you're going to be writing about in that paragraph. So if we use the idea of a hot air balloon, then you can take a snapshot with the hot air balloon in the distance. Next, you want to zoom in and capture the details, and this is where your language analysis comes into play. So this is where you carefully select your quotes. Don't just choose any old one, but think about the relevance that that quote will have to your answer and to your snapshot, and analyse one word from that quote. So be careful to say what the effect of the word is and not just define it. You could also comment on the writer's technique, anything that they've used in particular, simile, metaphor, personification, pathetic fallacy, and explain why they have used that method. So if we use the hot air balloon analogy again, then you've got a close-up of the hot air balloon. The third point then takes your writing to another level and shows that you're really thinking thoughtfully and carefully about how you're writing and about what the writer intended to achieve. And it's the idea that you change perspective so that you can get an additional viewpoint. So with the hot air balloon, this picture is taken from the hot air balloon instead of the hot air balloon. And it's the idea that you think differently about the quote that you've used or about the point that you're making in order to make your point really developed and really detailed. It shows that you're evaluating what you've written and you're considering alternative interpretations. It shows that you can think deeply about the text and you understand how different people might look at a text differently. So if we're looking at Shakespeare in particular, a modern audience is going to view the play very, very differently than a Shakespearean audience. And this is where you can write it in that kind of third section. So to give you another example, which is taken from Mr. Pip by Lloyd Jones, on the next slide, Lloyd Jones shows that life is difficult for the children on the island, but that they have become accustomed to violence and fear. Okay, that's your snapshot. That's in a simple sentence what you're talking about in that paragraph. Your zoomed in detail then. The children are not alarmed to hear sporadic gunfire and see a Redskins gunboat, showing that these events are part of normal life. The fact that Lloyd Jones uses a simile, talking about technique, to compare the boat to a grey sea mouse indicates that they see the conflict as natural and liken it to creatures around them. And the additional perspective then, which also can focus on language analysis, as is the case here. However, the word grey contrasts with the beautiful natural colours of the blue sky and turquoise sea, and as grey is often seen as a dark, menacing colour, this could indicate that it is threatening and troubling. The children allow the boat and gunfire to merge with the background, but they are unable to completely forget its presence. Okay, so in there you're talking a lot about techniques, so simile and contrast. You've got a very, very clear opening that lets the marker see exactly what you're talking about, and you've done the language analysis. So there's plenty of quotes in there, although they're very short, there's a lot of them, and that shows that you're reading widely through the passage and that you're really thinking in detail about the words that Lloyd Jones is using. Another important skill that really does raise your writing up a level is embedding quotations. And so the problem when we're marking students' essays is that most students know that they have to make a point, they have to give evidence, and they have to explain it. And essentially, whether you use P.E.E. or whether you use the camera analysis, that's what you're doing. But often the way that it is written down can seem quite forced, it can seem formulaic, it can seem quite dull. And change in the way that you write slightly and the way that you look at quotations can really help with this. So this is a typical example of what you might see, or what you might write first of all, focusing on Macbeth. Macbeth is a moral character. For example, in Act 1, Scene 7, a quote to show this is, "He's here in double trust, first as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself." This shows Macbeth is having doubts about killing King Duncan. Okay, it's all right. Talks about, it has a topic sentence, has a quote, The explanation is very, very basic and needs expanding. There's a missing quotation mark, and the quote is very, very long. But that's something that as teachers we encounter quite a lot in writing about Shakespeare. To transform it, you need to think about how you can make your writing sound more fluent, rather than saying things like a quote to show this is, because it slows down the pace of your writing. Including very long quotes as well means that often you're not focusing in enough detail on individual words, and a lot of your word count, a lot of your time is being lost to copying out lengthy quotes. So on the next slide I'll show you an alternative way to write the same point and the same explanation. So that's the original one that we looked at on the previous slide. And here's how you could improve it. So Shakespeare encourages the audience to feel interested in Macbeth's character, as despite his ambition, Shakespeare makes him appear doubtful about whether he should murder the king. In Act 1, Scene 7, his soliloquy guides the audience through his thought process and the uncertainty he is feeling. Significantly, the fact that Macbeth is the only character present on stage suggests that Shakespeare wanted to show Macbeth as isolated and uncertain, and with no other character he can confide his fears in. The contrast Macbeth shows between his role as host and murderer show the dramatic internal battle he is facing. Furthermore, Duncan's double trust shows the extent of Macbeth's betrayal, but also indicates Macbeth is fond of Duncan and doesn't want to go through with the murder. So although that paragraph is based on exactly the same quote, it only uses 4 words, but it talks a lot about the context, it talks a lot about how Shakespeare wanted Macbeth to be acting, rather than looking at Macbeth as if he's a real character, and that's important as well. It also talks about technique, so for example soliloquy, talks about form and structure, and the fact that he's the only character on stage, and also talks about contrast as well. And so this is something that you are capable of, but just need to think about how you're actually writing your thoughts down. And some important points to remember, finally. The context of the quote is explained. So here I don't mean historical context and what was happening at the time, but I mean exactly how the quote is being delivered. So for example, where the scene comes in the play and what is happening. However, it isn't a lengthy explanation. It's not kind of saying exactly what the plot of the play is and who does this and what happens. It's just saying in this scene, Macbeth is having doubts about whether to kill Duncan. And that then it gives you the information that you need when you analyse the quotes. Second bullet point down, the effect of the quote is noted and explained along with the technique used. So we don't just say this shows that Macbeth is nervous, but you actually say how it shows that he's nervous. You talk about the effect, and you also talk about any techniques. So in the case that we just looked at, which you can always flick back to, we talked about contrast as a technique. Form and structure is mentioned, and it links to the point of the paragraph. So we talk about the soliloquy, and it's to demonstrate Macbeth's isolation. The quotes are short and rich, only 4 words are used, but there's a lot that you can get out of those 4 words. And the paragraph is fluent, and the question is answered. So hopefully the combination of the camera analysis as a new perspective of looking at how to write your essays, and also embedding quotations, this will really, really help you to move up to the next band in your controlled assessments.